You're listening to Change Your POV Podcast, episode number 50. We did it. So Change Your POV Podcast was really meant for veterans. But then I started to get feedback like this from Shaylin. Thank you for making this group and all the podcasts you do. I find it a lot easier to help connect with quite a few of my friends. Not trying to say I fully understand what they had gone through, but at least I have an idea now.
Welcome to Change Your POV Podcast, helping you navigate transitions in your life, like entering and exiting college or the military, changing jobs or careers, and providing you with the coaching and mentorship needed to help you advance in your personal or professional life. Sometimes all you need is to change your point of view. Now, here's your host, Eddie Lazary.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Change Your POV Podcast. I am your host, Eddie Lazary, and this is episode number 50. This is a landmark episode for me, and here's why. When I first started this journey, I had a blog. I wanted to send my message out to as many people as I wanted, and somebody said, you should maybe try podcasting. And, of course, I've listened to a few podcasts, and I like them, but I can't do that. I don't know how to set it up. I don't know the tech behind it. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I don't know what guests I'm going to have on. And I came up with 101 reasons why I can't do it. And of course, I'm also a perfectionist, and I always tend to make perfect the enemy of good. And I've talked about that on several podcasts episodes so far. And so when I first started this journey, I said, let me figure out how to do this. And I gave myself a stretch goal. I said, you know what? I'm going to put out 2 episodes a week, and I'm going to go until episode 50. And if by the time I get to episode 50, if it isn't something that I still like to do, if it still isn't something that I find value in helping others, then I probably will hang it up. And so this episode, it's special to me, and I hope it'll be special to you as well. We're going to take a journey backwards in time and kind of look at the progression of Change Your POV Podcast all the way from episode 1 to episode 50. So let's go with me on this journey. Hope you enjoy it. Well, hello, and thank you for joining me today. This podcast is brought to you by ChangeYourPOV.com. So this is me back on episode 1. You could probably hear in my voice that I'm very unsure about what the hell it is I'm doing. I told myself when I first started this that I would record episode 1 and I would never, ever, ever go back and listen to it again, because I knew if I did, I would just hang it up right then and there and I would never continue. So this is it. See if you can notice the difference between then and now. Let's take a listen. Of this podcast. So a little bit about me. I was in the military for 10 years and loved it. Was deployed to Iraq. Spent a year in Korea. Did a lot of time in Fort Hood, Texas, and 8 NTC rotations in Fort Iraq. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. I'm not going to make your ears bleed any more than they already have, because that's as much of the first episode that I've heard since I did it, and I'm all set. I'm good. I don't need any more. It's interesting because I did several more solo episodes. I did one on acronyms and a couple of others. And although the information was probably good, the delivery was far from good. And I didn't know at the time that I was going to eventually have a co-host for the show. And those of you that listen know that's Mr. Bennett Tanton. And it's it's a lot of people ask me, how did he kind of come to be and where did he come from and everything. So here's a quick story about our friend Bennett Tanton. I wanted to connect with some other folks in that space, those that were helping veterans, those that perhaps were maybe even doing podcasts. So I started to listen to a lot of different veteran-centric, or at least military podcasts. And I heard this one podcast called Cigars and Sea Stories. It's a bunch of Marines that kind of get together and sit around and kind of shoot the shit. It was really, really fun to listen. You're almost like a fly on the wall listening in on their conversation. I really enjoyed it. I listened to a little bit more serious podcast by Dan Evans, military entrepreneur, and that was a really good. He does a lot of really great guests. He brings them on, talks about entrepreneurship, a lot of veterans. So I just started to kind of expand my horizon, so to speak, to see what other people out there were talking about. And I got into, I can't even remember now which Facebook group it was, but it was a Facebook group that I was in amongst other veterans. And I just kind of said, hey, anybody interested in perhaps joining a military mastermind group, or at least a veteran mastermind group? And several people jumped on right away, and one of those individuals, of course, was Bennett. And he and I started to talk, and at the time, I didn't know that he was on Cigars and Sea Stories, even though that was one of the podcasts that I was listening to regularly. I didn't connect the dots in terms of who this person was that wanted to join this mastermind group. So I started to talk with him, found out that he was on Cigars and Seas. He obviously found out about my podcast, Change Your POV, and he listened to a few episodes. I can't remember how many we were into at the show at the time. Maybe, I don't know, I think less than 10 at the time. Had to have been. I asked him, I said, hey, Ben, I don't know you. Now remember, this guy lives in Maryland, Delaware, on Dover Air Force Base. And I live, of course, in New Hampshire, so I've never met this guy. I didn't know him from Adam. And I said, hey, man, you're a veteran. I'm a veteran. And one thing that veterans have for sure is the ability to just tell each other just the way it is, straight up. That's one thing that I really value in my friends that are veterans, or those that serve, or maybe even those that are currently serving, is if I wanted the truth, all I had to do was ask, and I knew I was going to get it. I may not like what they're going to say. It may sting a little bit, but you know what? I'm going to get the truth one way or the other. And I asked him, I was like, flat out, man, I was like, hey, what do you think of this show? And he said, in the most eloquent way that only Bennett can, he says, you know, man, your solo episodes, they just suck, dude. They just suck, he said. And I was like, oh. And he's like, nothing against you, man. It's like, everybody finds solo episodes much more difficult to do. If you've been doing it for any length of time, you'll know. They're just hard. It's hard to engage. It's hard to sound, to keep your audience kind of engaged with the conversation. He goes, don't get me wrong, I think your topics are fine. He goes, but the delivery, man, just sucks. And he said, if you're ever interested in having me come on and just kind of, be a kind of a guest on your show where you can bring up a topic of conversation and we can kind of go back and forth. He goes, it's much easier having somebody on your show that you can talk to. He goes, don't worry, man, I promise I won't take over your show or anything like that. I just want to help out. And I'm like, I said, you got a deal, man. Welcome, folks, to Change Your POV podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Lazary, and today we are joined by none other than Mr. Bennett Tanton.
The shit show himself.
The shit show himself. And so began Bennett and I's, man-love affair. At the end of the day, let's call it what it is. So we started off by picking a couple of topics that we wanted to kind of kick around, like I said. And the first one we chose was his story, a Marine wearing an Army uniform, in episode 7, followed by a very controversial topic, women in combat arms, episode 9. And then we said, yeah, that wasn't enough. We got to take it one step further. And we talked about Bo Bergdahl's story in the episode Desertion, the Real Story, on episode 11. Let's hear some clips from these episodes.
See, one of the things, and I don't remember anything like this from the Army, like and I know that the Army had them, but once again, I say I identify as a Marine.
Right.
So the leadership traits within the Army. Okay. Well, the Marine Corps turns everything into an acronym, as does the Army for the most part. But the Marine Corps has a special little thing that they call, and you may have heard of it, you never know, called JJ Did Tie Buckle. Okay. So I'm gonna give everyone a little knowledge here. I just want to see it. And I want to see it done the way I did it, in the way that every other guy's got to do it. Because you can't cherry pick. But at the end of the day, too, I love it when I'm going to start seeing women. Initially, there were mixed reports of his capture. Like, how did he get captured?
Oh, right.
And like you know, he got captured on patrol, or he was drunk out in town, or, you know what I mean? Like, seriously, drunk out in town?
And there's something else, too, about Bennett that you may or may not have been able to pick up while listening to several of these episodes. And that is, you know, Bennett's a really deep guy. I mean, surprisingly, well, I don't know why it's surprising. A lot of guys are deep. But I just kind of thought, you know, being a member of Scars and Sea Stories, being a Marine, being in the Army, you know, he works for the VA, works with, you know, veterans, homeless guys. You know, it takes somebody with a pretty, you know, thick skin or, you know, rough exterior to kind of, I don't know, fit that stereotype. But then I got to know Bennett a little bit better and found out that he is really very soft and compassionate. I don't mean that in a negative way. That's a very powerful, strong trait to be as a man. It takes a stronger man to be one of compassion and be one of feelings and to care and to show empathy. And he's taught me a lot in that regard. And we started to talk about some things that are really close to his heart. In episode 15, we talked about gaining perspective. You know, things that we needed to just talk about and get off our chest. And in episode 17, we talked about veterans and meditation and does it help? You know, something that he often refers to as kind of some topics that are woo-wooey. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of unconventional things out there that really do help the veteran community, and this was one of them. And you know what? I didn't know this. I learned something myself.
Just because you think you're okay doesn't mean you're okay. How are you affecting the people around you? Let's look at that for a second. Ask your wife or your kids or your mom or your dad or your grandparents or whoever your significant other is. You know, they're probably going to be like, yeah, your times when you're a little fucked up. Because I know my wife does it to me every day. Dude, what's up with you? Shut up.
It's okay to have an opinion. It's okay to be objective. You know, it's okay to, I mean, we're in America. I mean, you and I, we fought for these freedoms, for the ability to have an opinion and speak our mind and all. That's awesome. That's what we did, you know, served for. But it's also important to understand that sometimes a myopic view of something isn't conducive to reality at times. I mean, there's been many things where I've thought one way and then all of a sudden something changes my mind. You know, especially you're talking about military veterans.
Oh, my
these guys
God, man. I mean,
you know, I'm a big combat veteran. Or I'm not going to meditate. That's for sissies or something.
Whatever.
You know?
But it's like, you know what? Shut up. Again, get over yourself.
But people that actually finally, not cave, I won't call it cave, but people that finally put their ego aside for 10 seconds and say, you know what, I don't have all the answers, because if I did, I wouldn't be suffering, you know, with these symptoms that I have.
Exactly. If you had the answers, you would be perfectly healthy.
And part of my mission at Change Your POV podcast was to give people some insight into me, into who I am. Who's Eddie Lazary? Where did I come from? What am I about? And who better to help me describe my story, my history, than bringing on some of my guys that I served with, that served with me and for me in Iraq. I first brought on my driver, Luke Herbst, in episode 2, where he shares with us his story of PTSD. And it was really my first conversation with anybody on this show about that topic. I didn't quite know how to navigate it, or what even to ask, or how to even convey it. But I let Herbst do the talking, and I realized that that's kind of the best way to interview somebody, is just ask the question and let them answer it. I followed that up by bringing on some of my other guys, My gunner from my time in Iraq, Roy Milbrat, you can hear him on episode 19 and 21. Brandon Baza, you can hear his episode on episode 6 and 8, and he too shares with us his struggles with PTSD and how he was able to succeed in the civilian world. And then much later on in the series of 1 to 50, I bring on my counterpart, my number 2, Mr. Jay Fondren. We talked about our experiences as non-commissioned officers, as senior squad leader and second squad leader in our platoon. In his episodes 40 and 42, he shares with us our unique perspectives in a battle of Sadr City, April 4th, 2004, in episode 40, and then we follow that up with his personal story in episode 42. Let's hear a little bit of clips from these.
And one thing I've learned, with my PTSD is just, it's mine. And for a long time, I let it kind of own me. I was like, well, I have to be an alcoholic or have to be mad. And it wasn't until relatively recently that I decided to own it and make it mine.
I would have to say the thing that really stands out the most that I can say that I have brought from my service into my life now, it's the people. That's really what it is. Because that's really the thing that still matters to me. If anybody listening to this has never talked to a therapist, even if you don't think you need to, I would say just find one locally, do some research, see, some reviews, find a good one that comes highly recommended, and just go in there for an hour.
I got to take that experience and tell that to people. These kids that are going through the same types of peer pressures and everything that I went through, and them realizing there is something outside of this crime-infested, drug-infested city that I could benefit from. So doing that, talk to them, and they join the Army. They ship off to basic training. They come back and they say, Sergeant Milbrook, thank you so much. That's right there. That's why I love doing what I do. I'm walking up a little ways and everything, doing my thing, and I turn around and you were nowhere to be found, and the truck started pulling onto Pluto. You guys left me behind. I had to yell at Herps to tell you guys to stop so I could jump back into the truck. So there was that one.
How the hell did we forget you?
I don't know. Hilarious. Now it's funny as hell now. But
you're like shit and bricks and start driving away.
I'm running towards the truck, telling Luke to stop.
And to be honest, I don't really know exactly what it was I was expecting out of doing this podcast. But one thing I can tell you now that we're 50 episodes in is it's been fun. I mean, I've never laughed so hard as I have while interviewing certain guests on the show. But at the same time, something that I didn't expect is, man, it just kind of drew up a lot of emotions in me as well. Talking with some of my guys and some folks about some really difficult things. Yeah, it took me places I didn't think I'd ever go again emotionally.
But that night you were like, Herps, just stay in. We're not going to be here too much longer. We're only going to be here for a quick minute, and then we're going to get back and we're going to roll. We sat there for a little bit. I used my optics and I scanned Mechanics Village to see if there's any bad guys over there or anything like that. And you got into the truck and you're like, all right, head north. And as soon as all 4 tires hit the hardball, boom, right where our truck was at. It was a buried IED. And for whatever reason, because at that time we didn't have the, whatever the hell they're called, to block the signals and stuff like that. We had our regular Colt Humvees, which were fiberglass doors, and that was it.
Yep.
And as soon as all 4 of those tires hit, it blew, and it was, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it now. For whatever reason, and it didn't blow up right when we were parked on top of it, and it just, I knew as soon as it blew, we reported up, and then we went back to Iron Horse, and we got back up on the ready line. And I jumped out of the hatch, I threw my Kevlar, and I started crying and breaking down, and you were right there, and you lifted my spirits, and you held me high, and And what I don't know exactly what you said or anything, because I was so lost in that moment of that near experience. Whatever you said, we were able to just go on and do our mission. And it that one, I think about that one a lot more, because that was such a close call.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I remember what I said to you, and the reason I remember is because it's something that no NCO should ever have to tell their soldier, and it was the hardest thing that I ever had to say to anybody, and that was look you square in the face and say, Millie, you have to just come to terms with the fact that you're already dead. You're not going home. And for those that have never served, that's hard to understand. But there's a point when you're fighting in combat, there's a point where you have to just surrender to the fact that you're not going to go home and see your family, because there's nothing wrong with hope, and everyone should, I guess, to some degree hold on to hope, but holding on to hope so tightly impairs your ability to do your job.
Right.
And you almost have to kind of let it go and just say, you know what, if it happens, it happens. I'm already dead. Let's just do this thing and get it done. And it arrives at everybody at different times through their deployment. But for that night, I think you and I both arrived at it together.
Right.
And that's why I was able to say it to you, because I was saying it to myself as much as I was saying it to you, because you're right. That was such a real moment. Like, we were standing there looking at each other saying, we should not be standing here looking at each other.
Right.
You know, we should be in a freaking body bag right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, on one hand, it was kind of exhilarating to know you cheated death, but it was humbling to know that you cheated death.
Right.
Right. And to have those very extreme conflicting emotions is very, very tough to explain to somebody that's never been there.
Right.
But to look at you and say, you know what, you just have to realize you're not going home, you're not leaving Iraq, you're dying here, and the sooner you come to that realization, the sooner you'll be able to get back onto that saddle and back onto that horse and get out there and do your job. After that, man, you were evac'd out. I think you got evac'd to the green zone initially. I'm not sure if you were put into a chemically induced coma there and then flown to Germany, or where all that happened, but I know that you ended up going to Germany for a while and then ended up back in Walter Reed in the States, and I believe you were in a chemically induced coma for over a month. But that was right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
and
day before.
It was man, that was a rough holiday, man. I remember, the dining facility, how they do everything they can to try to keep spirits up, and they do little special things for, Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter and whatnot. But they had done up all the decorations and stuff for Thanksgiving, and they had all the fixings and the turkey and the stuffing and all that. And I just remember going into the dining facility. It was supposed to be this happy, celebratory type of atmosphere that you would normally have, even though you're deployed away from your family. You still celebrate, these holidays. And I just remember going in the dining facility, and everybody just kind of went in together. And I just remember getting a place. I got a plate and a cup and some silverware, and I remember setting a place at the table for you. And I went and grabbed my food, and I just sat down, next to an empty place setting, and just, said a prayer for you, because at the time nobody knew if you were going to make it. We were basically told by the brigade surgeon and the folks there that treated you, that tended you that day, that hope for the best but don't expect a whole lot. They almost kind of expected you to not pull through, to suffer that kind of an injury
Yeah.
and to lose that much blood. But I will say that whoever reacted and did what they did on site definitely saved your life, man.
Man, that's hard to listen to even now. One of the main questions I like to ask, particularly my veteran guests, are questions like, what did you find challenging when you separated from the military? And what are some things you were able to carry forward with you into, the civilian world post-military? And I just love these answers. Let's listen to some.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just exactly that. We have a sort of a never quit attitude. If you fail, or if you run into an obstacle of some kind, you see that as a challenge, not as ultimate failure. You may fail temporarily, but it's like, oh, well, that's just an opportunity to regroup, kind of refine the plan, and go back at it and attack from a different direction, right? I was angry at the world. Nobody understood me. And this is getting back to, the three tenets of Warrior Hall. I didn't get why people didn't get me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand that people didn't get me because they hadn't been there, and they didn't get anything about the military experience because they hadn't suffered through what we had suffered through.
There's all of this bullshit where it's like, oh, try your best and you're going to do this and best foot forward and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, thanks. I got over that in grade school. I'm a Marine, for Christ's sake. You think that I'm not going to put my best foot forward? Oh, I decided to half-ass this training evolution so that my whole squad could die. What are you, out of your mind? No. So when you come out into the regular world where civilian pace is 1/2 tempo your pace, it's your obligation as a veteran to seize every opportunity you can. It is your duty.
I hated the Iraqis. I can't say that I was there, that I was joyed to be there when we started losing people and had so many people getting injured. Now with the time away from there, I can understand why some of those people, not the militants, did what they did, but fathers trying to get food and water for their kids, electricity. If I was put in the same position as some of them, I would have done no less than they did.
Some of them really didn't adjust to my way of doing things, but then I didn't adjust to the way they did things either. It kind of went both ways. So there's some headbutting going on there a little bit.
Businesses, like 99.9% of them require a lot of hard work, a lot of determination, and there are always a learning experience.
Yep.
And that you have to look at it long term. You can't look at it like, you got to realize that most businesses, their first, is it 5 years, 3 years, or 5 years, will not make a profit.
Yeah, so the statistic is better than 90% of businesses will fail in the first year.
Right.
One of the most interesting things about Change Your POV podcast are just the incredible people that I have the opportunity of meeting and speaking with. I mean, I've got guests that I've spoken with, like Russ Waltman, my first and only Vietnam veteran, and he shares with us his story that takes actually 2 episodes to discuss, episode 34 and 36. I also have an opportunity to speak with some internationals. I speak with Cindy Kennedy, a member of the Royal Australian Navy, and she shares with us her struggles with an illness called Hashimoto's disease, something I never even heard of before. And who can forget Wes Kennedy, Canadian Special Forces operator. Man, what an amazing guy. And then there are just these anomalies, like an Air Force enlisted PhD. Yep, you heard that right. Dr. Robert Garcia is an Air Force enlisted member that has his PhD. What a great story that is. And then I have an opportunity to speak with Keith Howard. He was a former homeless veteran turned executive director of a veterans transition house, and guess what? It's right here in my backyard, Manchester, New Hampshire. And then I hear amazing stories like Eric Packard's, a veteran that actually attempted suicide, and thank God he failed. But he's now the voice of change, lobbying to save the boundary waters. What an amazing story in episode 25. Let's hear some clips from these amazing stories and these amazing people.
There was a lot of places they sent us up in the mountains, but we had 5 places. They were called I Drank Valley, I Saw Valley, Happy Valley, Bomb Song, and the Picket Line. When we knew we were going to one of those 5 places, we doubled up on whatever you could carry. January the 31st, 1966, they assigned me as an ammo bearer, and we walked into a huge ambush.
The strongest 180 I ever turned was when I read The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill, and there was a chapter that said to give away your talents. And once I started doing that, I started being successful. No joke.
I sort of really want to turn it on its head and embrace technology and make it a lot more available, because like Australia's a really big country and we're really spread out, and a large proportion of our population are living in rural or quite remote locations, and so they have very limited access to medical facilities. So it's hard enough even just to see a regular doctor, but to have access to natural medicine is even harder again. So that's something that I'm really passionate about addressing, especially with what we've been through. So I know what it's like to have to travel and do it over and over. So I want to try and eliminate that for as many people as I can.
Oh man, start early. I wish I had started like 4 or 5 years. There's work I could have been doing 4 or 5 years prior to getting out, and I would have so much content and value and stuff to give my audience and put out on social media. And I mean, the business would have exploded like 2 or 3 times faster.
Because chances are you're not serving in the military.
Right. If you're chronically mentally ill, unless you have a really cool mental illness, but okay, thank you for laughing. I was attempting to be humorous, and then I realized
I got
I had nothing.
No, I got that. I was like, you just described like me and all my buddies.
Right. I mean, right. If you're a sociopath, you can get into the military. But
we probably all have a little bit of that tendency, but you know.
He exploded. He went off. He goes, I'm going to tell you, whoever the fuck you are. He goes, my friend Russ Waltman was killed in Vietnam 47 years ago, and you call my fucking house and pretend that you're somebody that you're not? I said, Joe, hold up, buddy. Hold up. I said, I'm not dead.
You know, everybody in the United States has a say about this. You know, this is our land, and this is your natural parks, your wilderness park. So that's why we're trying. It's a federal issue. I mean, there's some state issues within it, but it is a federal issue. So we meet and we talk with them, and we try to explain the threat, and we try to put a personal face on it.
Wow, what I tell you, some amazing people, right? The next group I'd like to present first is Dave Ricard in episode 3. Now, this is a non-military mentor of mine who opened my eyes to things in the corporate world that I just wouldn't have known otherwise. He had a lot of patience for me, and I owe him a lot. Dallas English, an Air Force enlisted who, created his own iPhone app while serving in the Air Force. Terry Scott is a veteran who owns her own virtual assistance company, and she shares with us her experiences. And then we have Brian Dunaway, a Navy veteran and, my cousin, carving his way as a business owner and entrepreneur in episode 44. And then we've got Jay Knight in episode 38, fellow podcast, host of Veterinology. He rode his bike from Boston to the West Coast in something like 4 months with all of like $20 in his pocket. Craziness.
We're trying to get our month's numbers out. We're trying to make our commitments to stockholders. We're trying to be successful as a business unit so that corporate is happy with our performance. And at the end of the day, all of that is important from a business sense, but really what's important is taking care of each other, and especially the guys and gals who serve our country that make our job possible, that we protect them.
So a lot of people think that they can't get into business for themselves unless they have a college degree. What would you say to those people?
I don't have a college degree. It's just you don't need a degree or a formal education. I'm going to college. I haven't taken a class in a while, but I'm about 11 classes away from finishing my bachelor's. I found that a lot of these classes, you're just getting the opinion of the instructor or the professor, whose opinion is no more valid than your own.
You know, even something as simple. I had a conversation today with someone, 2 continents away from me, 2 or 3 continents or so. And, I've had a conversation with them through video chat. And how amazing is that? I have friends literally around the world, friends and business contacts. I've done business with people around the world.
It's really easy to start a business. It's scary how easy it is to get approved to start a business. They approve you like you know what you're doing.
Right.
No freaking clue. No help at all. So, we're not even repairing welding equipment. I'm still working for American Welding and Gas. We started up a welding shop.
only worrying about yourself and doing things for yourself, but everyone has low points. And when you live your life in a way where you treat the people around you like you love them and that you care about them, then when you need that, you will have that.
So far you've had an opportunity to listen to all of the wonderful guests that I've had on the show. Not all of them yet, but this kind of brings us to the point where I'd like to share with you. Bennett and I decided to do some during our weekly banters, our weekly engagements as we call them. We decided to take more of a laser-focused approach, and we did a 3-month focused set of series. The first month, we did a series on pre-military, so we did episodes every week talking specifically about pre-military, those that are interested in joining the military or want to maybe dip their toe in it, see what it's like, almost a peek behind the curtain, so to speak. And then we did a month, and we did episodes specifically geared towards currently serving military. We did a lot of research, and were able to come up with a lot of good resources. In order, let's go ahead and take a look.
So you will definitely get everything you need. So regardless of what your best friend that's already gone through basic tells you, because they're going to tell you a bunch of shit just to kind of mess with you, don't bring anything with you. And the military, unlike any other organization I've been a part of, really values that rich history. And at the end of the day, you are superseding the men and women that fought before you, that served on battlefields long before you. To not know a little bit of that lineage and that history, you're kind of doing everybody that served before you a little bit of a disservice, you know?
Right. But if you're not there in your mind, you're screwed. So get your mind right. That's the most important thing, to go into this with knowing that you just go in there with the no quit attitude, that no matter how painful it gets, that you're just never going to quit. And if you can do that, you'll prove a lot to yourself, and you'll realize that you can do anything literally that you put your mind to. I just remember unleashing on a couple of guys in the boxing ring because I'm like, wow, I'm going to call home, God damn it.
Oh, so you knew that was a reward.
Yeah, they said, if you make someone bleed, you had to make them bleed. And I shit you not, dude, I made the dude bleed, and I was like, look at him, he's bleeding. It was so fun. It was so stupid.
If you're looking to get promoted to the next rank, particularly within the non-commissioned officer and officer rank, then you've got to put together a promotion packet. And guess what, folks? You are responsible for putting together your own packet.
And
guess
you're going to need your I Love Me book for that.
You are going to need your I Love Me book for it, because they're going to want copies of everything we just talked about. Everything.
And if you can do that and transfer those courses in as general credits and electives, it'll just make your life so much easier, and frankly, it's cheaper. So
right. And I think the end of the day, the point we're trying to make here is all of these things you're going to end up doing in the military along the way anyway. Would you say that someone with 10,000 people in their quote unquote network have a greater or deeper or stronger network than, say, someone that may have only 100 people?
It depends on the relationship that person has with their network. If they're on there adding value to the people in their network, then by all means, they've got, again, that's what it comes down to.
Listen. I am not going to tell you that PTSD is not a real deal. It is. There are symptoms that I deal with all the time, and I'm not going to get into that right now because that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is this, folks. At the end of the day, there will come a point where you will just run out of PTSD hooks to hang your hat on. You just will. Stop losses happen, things like that. I get it. But generally, you know when you get out, and I know I've got 12 months left. I'm a Combat Arms MOS, has been my entire career. I joined the military right out of high school. I really don't have any other than military. I have really no other skills or experiences. I don't even know really what I want to do. What would you say to me in that case?
Don't get out.
It was nuts. It was like a whole nother world, man. Whole nother world. Craziness. Yeah, I try not to feel bitter about it, but I was.
Yeah, how many years ago was that?
2004.
Wow, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Look at you harboring it like a little freaking...
I know, like a little bitch, right?
Like a little cuddle bunny.
Wallowing.
Yeah.
Wallowing.
Wallowing like a bitch. Yep.
she started having seizures and needs a seizure dog. So we raised.
wow.
She had to raise like $7,000, and she gave the money for that part to her. So
That's crazy.
yeah.
How do you train a dog to have seizures?
Well, it's a.
I'm just kidding, man.
See, this is what happens when you get tired. You just fucking start rolling with it. You're like, yeah. So I was gonna figure out how to explain this fucking thing.
All right,
shit.
cool. Well, all right. Next question. And it hurt me. It hurt me greatly. I mean, one of the biggest things was I didn't know how to estimate accurately. So by the time I got done with the job, I was eating the cost of the job. I would make X amount of dollars, but I would spend Y, and Y was greater than X. So I was spending more than I was making on these jobs.
Oh, man. Some good times, for sure. You know, as a podcaster, you always wonder to yourself, I wonder what's going to resonate with the audience. I wonder what they're going to like. Because, you know, as Bennett would say, at the end of the day, you know, I'm not doing this for me. I'm not really doing this for Bennett. I'm doing this for you, the listener. Those people that tune in, that download every week, every episode. And hopefully you are getting value out of this. And so, yeah, I mean, as a podcaster, I can't help but wonder. I wonder what people, you know, like. What do they like to listen to? And, you know, of course, I've asked on social media. I've asked on the podcast itself, you know, to reach out, contact me, you know, give me some feedback, leave a rating review so I can know better about what it is you guys want to listen to. You know, in the absence of any kind of real feedback, the only thing I have to go off of is which episodes get downloaded the most. And of course, it's not a big surprise to many who have listened, but I'd have to say the number one most downloaded episode, my most popular one, is episode 28. This is a weird episode. I don't even know if I definitely know we didn't plan it this way, but I wanted to share with the audience while talking with Bennett that night about my story of entrepreneurship, and how when I got out of the Army, I started my own business, and how my lack of knowledge and understanding of business really played a part in the failure of that business. And so I share with the audience in that story, in episode 28, my story of failure, basically. And it ended up being one of the most popular episodes, definitely one of the most downloaded episodes, and everyone gives me feedback that says it was just a really funny episode. And it was. I had a good time telling the story. Bennett, you can hear, definitely had a good time listening to it. So let's take a little bit of an extended snapshot into episode 28, and you'll kind of get some sense of what we're talking about.
So I'm grinding this guy's stump down, right? I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea how in the hell I didn't kill myself with this stump grinder machine, but I do. So I finished this stump grinding thing, and this guy's neighbor, across the street neighbor, comes over and he goes, "Hey, yeah, I see you doing some work over." He goes, do you drop trees? Now, if you've never been in New England,
Oh yeah, man, I know.
all right,
I grew
we're
up
talking
in Connecticut, so I know.
we're talking 60-foot pine trees, right? That are just huge, that will take out a house in one fell swoop. So this guy says, "Yeah, I got this pine tree in my front yard that I'd like to, you know, drop." I'm like, "Yeah, sure."
Now, needless
no
to say,
problem."
people go to like college. People go to school to learn how to freaking drop trees.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that.
To arborist school.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So I'm like, I go home and I look it up, right? And there's so basically the way this
episode of Axeman, I'm good.
The way this shit works is like there's like these spikes that you strap to your feet,
right.
and you use these spikes to climb up the tree, and you tie off like a rope, like a pretty hefty rope.
Right, and then you chop it up one piece at a time.
No. So what you do is you use that as like a guide rope to kind of put some tension on. So when you're dropping the tree, it actually falls the right direction, right? Because this tree is literally right up against this guy's house. So if it falls the wrong way, it's going through his house.
God.
So I'm ready for this? Hold on, it gets really good. Now, mind you, my company has insurance, but I don't know if it's enough to cover a whole freaking house. But I'm about to test the limits of my insurance company right here. So I tell my wife, we got to go buy spikes to strap to our feet so we can climb the 6.
You ever watch the lumberjack shows with Donnie? Because that's what I'm about to do.
Yeah, and I got my brother with me too, right? Mr. Evil Knievel, there's nothing, right? He agrees to be the guy that straps the spikes onto his feet and climb up this fucking tree. So we go to the store, and it was like a specialty store because not just everybody.
Curious tree climbing spikes.
Yeah. So I should have known, right? That the lights were going off, or should have been going off, when I brought these things up to the counter, and the guy behind the counter looks at what I'm buying, and he looks at me, and he looks back down at the spikes, looks at me again, and he goes, "You sure you want these?" I'm like,
"Yep."
I'm like, "Yeah."
Absolutely.
He goes, "You know what they're for?" I was like, "Hell yeah, they're for climbing trees." He goes, "How many have you climbed?" And I'm like, "None." And he goes, "All right, man. Good luck." So I buy these spikes. We drive out to the house, and here's my plan, right? I'm a pretty smart guy. I got a long rope.
I'm really good with my hands too.
Yeah, I got a long rope. So my brother is gonna climb up this tree, right, all the way to the top, and he's gonna tie off this rope once he gets to the top, and he's gonna scurry his ass back down, and then we're gonna hook the other end up to the end of my bobcat, and kind of pull it out into the middle of the street to provide a little bit of tension. And then we're going to start cutting the backside of the tree with the chainsaw. So as it starts to fall, the tension, right? Oh, perfect. I mean, that's like awesome, right? Classic. All right. So in order for this
fucking go wrong.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay. So in order for this shit to work, you really got to get to the top of the tree. You really have to. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I mean, there's tree climbing spikes for a reason. My brother, Mr. Fearless, he gets maybe 15 feet up the tree, right? 15 of the 60 feet he gets up the tree, and he's up there hugging that shit like a koala, right? Shaking his ass off.
I'm not good anymore.
He's like, "This is good, right? This is good." I'm like, "Dude, like, no. Like, I can almost reach up and touch you. Like, you got to go higher." So he's like, he climbs a few more feet up, right? He's like, "Is this good?" I was like, "Dude, it's a 60-foot tree. You've got to get at least 2/3 of the way up. At least." And he couldn't do it, man. He was just like petrified, frozen. I'm like, "Oh my God. Last thing we need is for him to fall." All right. I'm like, reach up as far as you can and tie this rope off, and we'll just make it work." He goes, "All right." So he does. He ties his shit off. And we get it. We get down to the bottom. He hops into the bobcat. He pulls back a little bit of tension. I grab the old chainsaw, and I get like halfway through the tree, and I tell him to back up a little bit, apply a little bit more pressure, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm nervous that this thing is gonna fall on the house and shit." And I'm like, "Oh man, just don't know what I'm gonna do." And all of a sudden, I literally cut halfway through the tree, halfway through the base of this tree, and the fucking rope snaps because there was so much pressure. It snaps. So snap, this tree now starts swinging back towards the house, out towards, I mean, this thing is swaying. You can hear it cracking on the bottom. I'm like, "Oh my God, we're going to put this tree in this dude's house." I'm like, "Holy shit." It was, I mean, literally, I'm shaking, right? I mean, I've gone through IEDs in Iraq that didn't scare me. So, I'm a pretty handy guy, but I know my limit. I should have called.
Should have known your fucking limit.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, and this was a Sunday, and oh shit, what am I gonna do? I'm like, I tell the guy, and he's standing there like, "What are you gonna do?" I'm like, "I got this. Don't worry." I go back in my car. Now
This happens.
Yeah. So now, yeah. So now I got this cut halfway through this tree, and any gust of wind is gonna blow this damn thing into this freaking guy's house, right? I'm like, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do?" So I go and I'm thumbing through like the yellow pages on my phone, just trying to find somebody who can do this shit. So I call this, and I'm calling, right? Everybody's closed on Sundays, of course, right? Everybody. I finally call some dude that lives practically in Maine, right? Practically in Maine. He picks up the phone, and you can tell he's like half lit, right? And I'm like, "Dude, you drop trees?" He goes, yeah, like Monday through Friday, and sometimes on Saturdays. He goes, it's Sunday, buddy. I'm like, dude, I don't care how much you charge. I'll double it if you can come down here and drop this tree. And he goes, all right, well, my girlfriend's going to have to drive me because I'm a little drunk. I'm like, all right, man. I give him the address. He hops in his truck. He's like almost 2 hours away. So now I've got 2 hours to watch this tree. Like, oh, just scary times, right? And so finally this dude shows up and he pulls out like the gear, like the proper gear, like the actual shit that you use to climb a tree. Right? I didn't know that there was supposed to be like this cable thing that wraps around
the strap and the whole thing.
Yeah. We didn't have that. We just had the
No wonder
spike.
your brother was shitting himself.
Yeah. Yeah, no shit, right?
Because he's like trying to climb the tree, hugging it.
Yeah, this guy's got like a 5-point harness, a cable wrap, like he's like got the shit, right? We were no way equipped. Like one pair of like spiked cleats is not the right shit. It just isn't. And not only that, but we were using like 550 cord, right? This dude pulls out like this 2-inch freaking rope. Like, I'm like, oh my god, this guy. So this dude, he like, not only that, but he's got this little chainsaw that he's got like on a bandolier, like a little like a C-hook thing.
Right.
And he like cranks that shit, starts it as he's climbing up the tree, and I'm like, okay, why is he hauling a chainsaw? Why? Because he's cutting off the limbs as he's going up so he can get high enough.
Right.
Duh, right? Why else would he be having?
Why would
Yeah. So he's like, he gets up to the top of this damn tree.
And meanwhile, the tree's already cut.
It is. He looked at it and he's like, yeah, man, you're already halfway through. I'm like, yeah, that's why I called you. He goes, all right, well, it's a little trickier now that it's halfway. I'm like, yeah, dude, it's like, he's running the risk of this thing like dropping while he's at the top of this bitch. He climbs up there, he gets to the top, and now mind you, he told me his girlfriend had to drive him in because he was already half lit, right? So this dude didn't have all of his faculties to begin with. Whatever. So he's at the top of the 60-foot tree, and he starts swinging and howling like a freaking like this dude was like crazy nuts. So anyway, he ties off the rope to the top of the tree. He does some other shit, and he repels. He like literally like shoots backwards off of the top of the tree and repels all the way down to the bottom, like in like 2 like leaps. I'm like, oh my god, this dude is like. By this time, you can imagine this is a pretty dense neighborhood community kind of a thing. And by the time this shit's all going down, like every neighbor for like 6 blocks have all gathered and like watching the fucking show on Sunday afternoon, right?
Yeah, like lawn chairs and beers.
Like the Super Bowl could have been on. These guys were out there watching this shit, right? So anyway, he goes, all right, where do you want this drop? I'm like, well, I want it to fall not on the house.
Anywhere but on the house.
I don't care, just not on the house. And he's like, all right. And he finished, he goes to his truck, he grabs a can of Coors, I think it was. He pounds a can of Coors. He literally cracks it open, pounds it empty, and he walks out into the middle of the street and he puts this can in the middle of the street and he walks back. And I'm looking at him like, is that like a Lucky Charm thing? Like, what's that all about? He goes, I'm going to drop the tip of this tree. I'm going to hit that can. I'm like, you're shitting me. And he goes, watch. And he stands back there. He's like, nee, nee, nee. Of course, he's got, mind you, I've already cut halfway through the tree. So he's got to overcompensate for my ignorance.
Your asinine cut.
Yeah. So he's like, nee, 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 nee. And he makes a few more cuts and he's kind of eyeballing it and shit. And next thing you know, you hear it crack, crack, crack. And sure as shit, that thing did not just drop right on top of that pop can and crush it. It was just spectacular. It was such a spectacular sight. Like literally, there was like 4 other neighbors that all came up to this dude and it's like, can you drop my trees while you're here? So he had not only made money on me, but he made money on like 4 other houses that afternoon. So what's the moral of the story? So the moral of the story is this. You got to understand the business acumen of business, number 1. And we can get into that in a minute. But number two, and probably more important, is you have to really understand what your business is, and more importantly than that, what your business is not.
Well, I hope you like that special look inside that episode 28 where I shared that story with Ben and the listeners about when I owned my own business. It's pretty crazy, but I think there's a good message in there. And then, as a podcaster, it's always awesome to finally link up with people that are actually in the same space. Maybe they've got a different message, maybe they have a different delivery method, but at the end of the day, they are doing what it is that you're doing, and that's helping, veterans and helping entrepreneurs and, helping those through different stages of their life through evolution and transition. Which brings me to my next two guests. They were a couple of the most recent within the first 50 episodes, and that is Robert McMahon, who shares his story of transitioning out of the Army into this, crazy world we call the civilian life, and how he's been able to leverage that experience and kind of cultivate his own business in teaching other veterans and entrepreneurs through his lectures and his education and through his workshops. What a great and fantastic guy I had an opportunity to get to know, and is now part of my network. And then Travis Collier, who is my first coastie and officer. He's an officer, active duty officer, major equivalent in the United States Coast Guard, and he is documenting his process of transitioning out of the Coast Guard into the civilian world, and he actually authored a book, Command Your Transition. Very, very, very cool guys. Awesome opportunity to get to meet them, not in person, but just over the phone, and get a chance to share their story with you. So let's listen to a couple of those episodes.
The real deal is applied knowledge is power. You take that with, we don't know what we don't know. And the reality is, the more we know we don't know.
Right, yeah.
Now here's where the clincher comes in, because a lot of veterans, a lot of us, take this one. I know what I know, and I don't need to know what I already know.
I went to my first TAPS class. I realized, oh, wait a second, most of my career is probably behind me, and now I got to work on this plan of getting out. And that's kind of why I went to Saudi Arabia. That's why I'm here in New Orleans. Like, I'm now having to balance my plan to stay in with my plan to get out. So those would be the three things I would say. Think 2 tours ahead, think 2 OERs or pit reps ahead, and have a plan to stay in and have a plan to get out, and be comfortable with both.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of this special episode number 50 of Change Your POV podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to the snapshot of the last 50 episodes as much as I enjoyed putting it together and listening back on these clips myself. At the end of the day, and that's a shout out to you there, Bennett, I gotta thank the people in my life that make this possible, my wife and my children, and Bennett. I couldn't do what I do without those specific people in my life. They support me, they back me, they provide me ideas and insights and constructive criticism and feedback, and I just can't thank them enough for being there for me so I can produce something in hopes that those of you listening could glean some information, some education, some help out of that. So I guess to answer the original question at the top of the show is, will I continue? Will I do more? And the answer is yeah. I mean, after 50 episodes, there's just so much more that I want to share, and more guests that I want to bring on and share their stories with you. I just think that I'm scratching the surface here. I don't think I'm really at the point where I'm ready to say, yep, I've done this enough. It's time to stop or move on. I just really think that I'm just getting going. I'm finding my stride, and I'm just having a hell of a lot of fun in the process. And along the way, I've tried my best to give back, and not just in information and resources, but I want to be able to provide something real tangible to the listeners and the audience out there. And so one of the things that I've been developing recently those of you listening to the podcast regularly will know, I created 7-Day Resume. And that's a program. It's a free email training program that will go live beginning June 1st of this year, just in a few short weeks. It is something that I took all of my knowledge and experience and education, and I created a 7-part training series specifically for you, the listener, because I know one of the things that most veterans struggle with, and again, this 7-Day Resume isn't specifically for veterans, but one of the things specifically that veterans deal with, and that's creating their resume. They don't know, how it's structured, what goes in it, what are recruiters and hiring managers looking for, how to construct it. I mean, all of those things are just, crazy concepts if you've never been formally taught. And so I wanted to put together something that was easy to follow and understand, and something that you could do yourself without having to go and spend hundreds of dollars on paying for somebody to put your resume together for you. So if you are interested in crafting a winning resume, if you're in the military and you're going to be getting out soon, definitely check this out. If you're already out and maybe you've already got a job, but you're interested in maybe that promotion, or maybe you're interested in doing a career shift or change into something else and you need a resume to do that, I highly it's free. There's no obligation whatsoever. There's no strings attached. Head on over to changeyourpov.com and there's information there at the front page, or you can just go straight to the site at 7dayresume.com and you can check it out. You just sign up, and beginning June 1st, you will be sent the first video, followed by a subsequent video every day after that for the remaining 6 days. And there's a community too. I've created a 7-Day Resume Facebook closed group where you can interact and speak with other people that are going through the course, or perhaps those that have already gone through the course that are there to help you out. So again, it's just a free resource that I put together for you, because I know it's something that the listeners are looking for, they're interested in, and they need help with. And so that's what I put it together for. This has been a fabulous journey up to 50 episodes. I look forward to 50 more, and maybe, I don't know, maybe on the 100th episode we'll do something like this again, or do something different. I'm not sure yet. I don't even know what the reception is going to be to this. I don't know. People are going to like it, not like it. I don't know. Something that I wanted to do just to kind of earmark the progress that we've made so far in our journey together. So with that said, thank you very much for tuning in to Change Your POV podcast. I again am your host, Eddie Lazary. If you want to reach out to me directly, you could email me at eddie@changeyourpov.com. Never miss an episode. Hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. We have a lot more great content headed your way. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Change Your POV podcast with Eddie Lazary. Check out more content by going to changeyourpov.com. And remember, your ability and willingness to change your point of view will open doors of opportunity.